We are live now, everyone. Welcome to the first ever LinkedIn live debate. Today, we'll dive into a controversial topic of NPS. Is NPS effective or a vanity metric? I'm your host today, Lee Hong Hicken, co-founder and CEO of They Said. They Said is the next evolution of B2B customer feedback. All right, let's dive into today's fun debate. One of the unique things about debate today is that the guests and topics are not chosen randomly. They are actually the true reflection of our guests' beliefs. So this debate is real and will get heated. The resolution and topic today is NPS is a vanity metric. Our judges today are the audience listening. That's right. The final winning team will be voted by the audience. And I'll share a voting link shortly in my LinkedIn. And today we have two teams here, the blue team who agrees with our statement and the red team who disagree with the statement. Let's see who they are. Okay. My first guest today is from blue team is the legendary Dave Jackson, author of best-selling book, Customer-Led Growth. Dave, I know you're famous, but for the audience who might not know who you are, can you say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I think most people call me infamous, not famous. Dave Jackson, I'm as old as I look. I started a SaaS company back in 2000, grown it, sold it twice, and I now coach CEOs on how to build customer focus.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. All right, my second guest on the proposition team, the customer retention truth teller, Greg Dames. Greg, please share a few words to our audience.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Greg Danes. I am the CEO of Churn, which is focused on doing customer churn analytics and consulting. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Welcome. Last but not the least, let's give a warm welcome to Manil Vasantha, the customer-centric champion. His expertise in customer support, success, and operations has helped large businesses like Oracle, CA Technologies achieve great growth and success. Manil, welcome to the team. Say a few words to the audience.
Thanks for having me, ma'am. This is a pleasure working with all the industry elites. So I'm a small fish. I've been in the industry serving customers in many ways, post sales for almost 30 years now. In my own ways, I have built teams from scratch and understand the challenges that we face every time we come up with new metrics, but we're not truly measuring our customers in any which way, shape, or form. So I'm open to listening to you guys, learning a lot more than contributing. Let's see how this goes. Thank you.
Great. We have some strong opinions, blue team and humble blue team, but no matter what, they're surely strong, opinionated, and ready to defend their belief. Let's welcome and get to know our opposition team, the red team. My first guest on the red team is Bill Cushard. Bill comes from a product background, and he's on a mission to dispel the myth around NPS and show the world its true potential. Bill, would you share a few words to the audience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Bill Cushard. I'm the general manager of partner success at Dragonboat. We help chief product officers make better product decisions. And I'm also founder and host of the Rebel Intrapreneur podcast. I'm so happy to be here.
Welcome, Bill. Great. Give it up to Adam Cullen, the product and engineering guru. I believe Adam is a true believer of NPS because at his last company, he's actually tying his pay to the NPS score. This is a definition of putting your money where your mouth is. Okay. Adam, say a few words about to the audience, please.
You have the mute on, Adam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Mullen. As they said, I'm a product and engineering guy. So unlike most people here, I'm more upstream. I'm one of the nerds that has to help you all action on the insights that you're hopefully getting from systems like NPS. I'm very happy to be here and to participate and contribute any way I can.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the team. All right, last but not the least, our last speaker is one and only NPS evangelist, Kobe Bo. One of the common opinions I heard about NPS is like, NPS is effective if it is implemented properly. So I made sure to invite Kobe here. Kobe is actually NPS certified and have many years of hands-on experience implementing NPS. And Kobe is actually the one kind of convinced me that, hey, NPS is kind of innocent. And the reason I started this debate, Kobe kind of convinced me like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe NPS is not that evil, and maybe NPS is innocent. So I want to see if Kobe today will put the skeptics in their place. Right? Welcome, Kobe, and please say a few words to the audience.
Thanks, Li Hong, and what a pleasure it is to debate amongst all of these professionals. My name is Colby Bach. I've spent the last 2 decades in customer-facing leadership roles. Today, I have the privilege of working as the Director of Customer Success Program Delivery at a company called ESG, where we offer customer success programs to companies of all shapes and sizes. So not only do I have experience doing this at a much larger company and driving an NPS program from start to finish and watching the benefits of it, I get to do it almost every day in my job for companies all around the world. So excited to be in this debate and see what we can learn.
Awesome. Welcome everyone to the team. Welcome, Kobe. Great. Well, let's not wait any longer. Let's get started. I want to go over today's rule and agendas. So first, we'll get in giving. There's 2 teams. We're going to have uninterrupted 30 minutes debate to show your proof with graph, slide deck, data, personal experience, storytelling, anything you have to throw at each other, right? So we're going to start with the red team, Bill's team, and we'll have 3 speakers. Each person have 5 minutes to speak. And on the blue team, we'll have 2 speakers, each speak 7.5 minutes. And after that, we're going to have a free debate time where opponents can pick questions. This is when the gloves will come off. And we'll also be looking at the chat button. So if anyone can look at the chat, my team member, Amy Long, who is the head of customer success, they said she's going to monitor the chat and we'll pick out the most spicy, controversial questioning we have and throw it at the guests. Anyway, let's get started. Without further ado, the first speaker will be Bill. You ready to get going? The stage is yours. I will start the timer.
I will start the timer too. Okay. Why NPS is not a vanity metric. Okay, first of all, there is evidence that supports NPS's link to growth. First of all, the net promoter scores actually do explain roughly 20 to 60% of the variance in growth between competitors in a competitive cohort. So on average, high NPS companies beat out its competitors by more than 2x. Secondly, if you compare the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index against an index of NPS, high NPS score indexes, the high index companies outperform the total market almost 3 times, and this is over 10 years. So this isn't short-term data. Okay, fine. Even if you don't buy that data, which I could question it too, I'd like you to think about NPS from first principles. Think of the question. It's a willingness to recommend question. Ask yourself, what could be more fundamental to how we should operate than to create and deliver value so good that people will recommend you to others? There is no better marketing than recommendations. There is no lower cost to acquire customers than recommendations. And we don't want you're telling me we don't want to track people recommending us and how much they recommend us? Our products and services must really be crap if we don't want to track customer recommendations. Okay, so now don't get me started on the difference between willingness to recommend and actually recommend. That's for another debate. So I'll put a pin in that. Now let me tell you a personal story that I've had with NPS, and it's sort of a counterintuitive story about why I came to believe in this metric. For 2 years, I ran a SaaS LMS business as a general manager. We used NPS that whole time. We had consistently negative NPS. I'm embarrassed to say. Okay. So if I go back to the evidence that I cited at the beginning, that 20 to 60% of the variance in competitors can be explained by NPS scores, our competitors were outgrowing us. Now, I'm not suggesting our negative NPS was the cause of that, but it does stand to reason that part of that explanation was related to our negative NPS, and at least it was a strong signal. So our customers, however, they were receiving value from us because they were doing $100 million a year in business through our product. So they were receiving value, but that doesn't mean they were willing to recommend us, right? So with that negative NPS in mind, and not just because of that negative NPS, with that, we made a decision to exit that business. So one, we got our NRR up above 109. We turned it from net negative net income to positive net income, and we exited to a competitor of ours. We had really good customers, and competitors wanted our customers, so we did all that. So let me tell you, so this is sort of a counterintuitive approach, right? Let me tell you a funny story. I told this story to Li Hong recently, that our NPS software was actually causing, in my opinion, our negative NPS. Okay, this is funny. We had a high touch business model, and we were trying to be low touch, all fancy, low touch, tech touch, and all that. And our customers hated it. And I went to analyze our negative NPS, right? I went through hundreds of comments, to the primary reason for your score question, and I read them all. 75% of those comments were product related and pop-up related. The quotes, "Stop with the pop-ups." Our NPS software was causing our negative NPS. So think about that for a moment. Okay. So here's why I think NPS is not a vanity metric, right? But actually quite actionable. And I submit this is a reason, this is something we often overlook. Okay, if you think of the three questions, the recommendation question, the primary reason for your score, and then the third question, would you like to be contacted by a manager about your score? What could be more actionable than contacting a customer who wants to be contacted because of a survey response? I can't think of anything more actionable than talking to a customer about their survey response, especially when they request it, and doing this one customer at a time to resolve their issues. I know everybody wants to be scalable and high tech touch and all that stuff, but I mean, one customer at a time, talking them through, resolving their issues is big time. So in summary, let me say this. NPS is a system, and there is evidence that supports it. Okay. We could argue about the efficacy of that, but there is evidence that supports it. I beg you to understand the fundamentals of NPS. Look at it from first principles. Think about willingness to recommend to other people, sticking their neck outs to recommend. When you find a system that works, use the system. Okay, Adam's going to talk about this. Use the system. When you skip or ignore steps in the system, you're not using the system, so of course it's not going to work. So that makes sense already. So finally, and this final point I want to make is inspired by our opponent, Greg Danes. Thank you, Greg, for inspiring this. If you do nothing else, if you believe nothing about my argument or our red team's arguments, I beg you, just operate this way. Create and deliver value to your customers so good that they will recommend you to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. This is awesome. It's great. All right. Next, we would like Dave Jackson, let me see here, to go on be the next speaker. Let's see here. I will.
Thanks, Li Hong. Hopefully we can get the slides. If not, I can talk through.
Yes, we're going to share the slides.
Good. So, Bill, I have to agree with you on one thing. What Greg said is right.
Well played.
And when it comes to the debate, there's a couple of things I will pick up. So in this section, let's just move on to the next one straight away, Li Hong, please. I want to go back to the roots. So Fred Reichheld first published this article, "The One Number You Need to Grow," in Harvard Business Review in December 2003. And I think it's worth understanding a little bit of the research and some of the basis on which all of this has grown. So if you can look at the next one, please. So Fred was actually interested in loyalty and how you could start to measure loyalty. And he came across Andy Taylor, who was the chief executive of Enterprise, who put him onto this idea about surveys. So what Fred did was he tested surveys to try to identify loyalty. He actually tested originally 20, but narrowed that down to 14 different questions. And what he found from that research was there's a relatively small difference in the correlation to repurchase. And actually recommendation intent was not always strongest. In fact, the recommendation question, what's now known as the NPS question, was first or second in 11 out of 14 questions. So he picked on one question, whereas actually part of his original advice before that article was test the questions and find which one works for you. Good advice. Second thing is every company, every industry that was monitored in that research was a B2C company. And B2C companies are very, very different to B2B because in a B2C context, the user is the buyer. That's not the same in B2B. So the research never ever tested B2B. In fact, I'll show you something in a minute which says it's probably not applicable. The third thing is the research did not include non-respondents. Now, the average response rate for a survey these days is around 6%. So 94% of people that were involved in those companies weren't included in the research at all. And by the way, I have a bit of history in this because I mentioned that I founded a company, a SaaS company in 2000. That SaaS company was a survey company. We were a competitor to people like SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics and Satmetrics. So we actually had a lot of customers using this. And they found the same, that the response rates to surveys was very, very low. The fourth point is that in looking at the results, Fred came up with this concept of promoters, passives, and detractors. And again, that stems from Enterprise, the car rental company, because what Andy Taylor said, basically, what their research showed was it's the highest scorers that are the most loyal. Now, those classifications that they came up with is based on aggregate data across all of those different industries. I can tell you, because one of the things we used to do as part of our work was we used to run something called the UK Feedback Forum. We got a group of people together from companies across the UK to talk about voice of the customer. And I know 3 companies at least that can tell you that people that scored 6s, 7s, and 8s were often as likely to recommend or to give bad word of mouth as 0s to 6s and 9s and 10s. And again, if you go back to Reichard's original researches, do the test yourself, find out where those thresholds are yourself. And Billy's presentation talked about the 20 to 60% relationship to growth. He's right. The thing is, what it relates to is relative growth. And the whole of the study was around relationship to market share, not linear growth of an individual company. In fact, I can find only one company that's even tested the relationship between NPS and their own revenue growth. And part of the reason for this is don't forget also that NPS is a lagging indicator. The data is backwards. It tells you what you have done, not what you're likely to do in the future. So if you could look at the next slide, please, Leon. This is a quotation. It says, the would recommend question wasn't the best predictor of growth in every case. In a few situations, it was simply irrelevant. For example, in database software or computer systems, senior executives select vendors and top managers typically didn't appear on the public email list we used to sample customers. So the people that have got decision-making power weren't actually tested. I'll come back to so go back to that next slide. Here's another quote. Retention rates provide, in many industries, a valuable link to profitability, but their relationship to growth is tenuous. Wow. By the way, this is a chart from a company called SaaS Capital, who is an investment company in the SaaS business. And that curve shows the relationship between gross revenue retention and growth. There's most definitely a very clear relationship between retention and growth. And to say it's tenuous is just mistaken. It may be tenuous in B2C, and I know my friend Greg's shaking his head there because he's going to share some more data. A next quote. Next slide, please. Sorry, no, that's not a quote. So what happened is we've gone from a study which looked at 14 questions with similar correlations with a questionable sample and method. And by the way, Reichel would never open up the data for peer review. And threshold variability that we know from people who've actually implemented the stuff and used it regularly. And we've taken this massive leap to one question and one classification as being the only way to do NPS. What a big mistake. Next slide, please. This is common sense is not that common. Very true. So here's a quote. All we did was quantify this common sense in a way that made sense to business leaders. The target audience for my book. These practical leaders note, have little interest in advanced statistical methods. Frankly, we see little value in continued debate about cause versus correlation, timeframes, or statistical methods. In other words, all that research that I did doesn't really count for anything because everybody's using NPS. Interesting point. All of the quotations I've shown you so far are from one person, Fred Reichheld, the guy that invented NPS. One penultimate quote. This is a guy called Richard Owen. He's a Brit. He lives in Scottsdale, Arizona now. He was the founder and chief exec of Satmetrics, who were one of the 3 copyright owners of NPS. He's since left that business and started another company. And this is what he said recently. Our work as innovators in NPS and customer experience led us to a revelation. Survey-based insights are simply not good enough for business decision makers to trust. Old thinking about NPS fails to deliver results. These are all words from people that built and populated and promulgated NPS. My final quote, and by the way, I love quotes. My final quote is not from, but this is from a French philosopher that lived most of his life in America. And he says, it's easier to believe a simple truth than a complex lie. And that's what we've got with NPS. Everybody's buying hype based on some research, which for a lot of organizations has got absolutely no relationship whatsoever. So we've got something which is effectively vanity metrics built on sand. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dave. I've never expected I'm going to get a proper NPS education from the people who think NPS is a vanity metric and all this data piling on my face. Now I'm wondering, Bill, did you regret it shutting down the business just based on the NPS score?
There were other factors involved.
Cool. Awesome. Great. This is great. All right. Our next speaker from the red team will be Adam. Adam, you get ready to. Do you need to share screen or anything?
No. I'm good with talking, and I think I'll start off with looking at what David showed us. It's very convincing, but that was talking about the old way of where NPS started. In the past 20 years, we've improved on the system. I mean, Reichheld published another article, what was it, a couple of years ago, about like the 3rd iteration of the system itself. And I think it's important not to tie our current thinking to where things started, but really look at where things ended up. But where things ended up today are like 85% of NPS programs fail in a recent survey, which is about in line with what other continuous improvement or improvement kinds of systems tend to do at companies, but it's usually not for lack of effort in my experience, in my observation, or in the research. It's for a lack of discipline and rigor. And as we heard before, that some of this is exacerbated by the automation and tooling companies that are trying to sell you a platform. And we heard about Bill's experience where people were getting survey fatigue and actually decreasing their satisfaction with the interactions because of this. But NPS can be what's right for you if, like you do what Bill said, understand what's important. But so can many of these other continuous improvement systems, Traction, 40X, OKRs. These are all these are all systems, but none of them will work for you if you try to outsmart the system and disregard the parts that you think are difficult or inconsequential. One of the things I work with my engineering teams on doing, especially the ones that are maturing and moving into different spaces, once we say one game and now are moving on to another game, the next level of the business, one thing I have to remind them is to whole ass one thing instead of half assing many things. So a lot of the barriers to really working the system, as Bill suggests, are leading to people trying to address too big of a problem space and half-assing too much of it. So to make it manageable, make it more focused with a narrower scope until you get the hang of the practice. You know, the failure mode that I've seen it, a lot of the companies that I've worked at, especially those that are going from startup to scale up, is the failure mode is like, well, we couldn't run 20 miles. So, you know, next week we're going to run 10. And then next week rolls around. Well, we couldn't run 10 miles. So now our next target is a marathon. Don't double down with things like instituting an NPS systematic approach to improving customer experience. Focus up. So, you know, Bill talked about what it isn't. Our position is it's not a vanity metric. And what it is, and the people on the call here, actually, I feel silly, you know, lecturing on this because they probably know more than I do, but for maybe the audience's benefit, it's a system and a methodology. It's not necessarily a framework where you get to pick and choose stuff that you think that you are going to that would be easy for you to do. And again, scale down, whole ass the whole thing. NPS can refer to the score itself or the entire system, and I think we need to make the distinction maybe in the live debate about what we're actually agreeing and disagreeing on. Is it the score or is it the fundamentals of the system? It can be, because it can be functional. It can function as a relational kind of survey or a transactional survey. And another problem that I see a lot of places run into is they confuse those two modes, where they're asking questions about transactions between an individual in a specific time, and then applying it to a relational problem space, or vice versa. And be extra careful not to confuse the people that are your audience, those customers. So, you know, make things distinct. And it's not the ends. It's, you know, NPS is a means. It's the start of an investigation. It's not a justification. It's not a panacea. If you keep it distinct and you keep it curious and you don't let it blow up into something it's not intended to be, then you can actually, you know, see these results that Bill was talking about. You know, there's that anti-pattern I think that we've all been part of, where that 3-question survey now becomes 30 or 300. Definitely had that at booking.com. Don't let that happen there. And the score itself is just one element of the system. In order to be useful, you need to do the rest of it. You need to use this for investigation, seeing who are the people that are happy, who are the people who are not so happy. I think Colby's going to talk to us about putting those people in the right proportion in the same room with one another to really help transfer some of that enthusiasm for your product and maybe help people with their success with using your products. But, you know, in leadership especially, I see spend too much outward energy on that score, and then the people that they lead forget about what it means. So fundamentally, understand what the goals of the company are. Don't treat the results. People then don't treat the results with respect. They don't follow on closing the loops on important opportunities. They don't actually make use of the things that NPS might lead them to. And then that leads them to not creating strategic initiatives around the findings, or, you know, more likely, you know, the findings that they didn't even bother to find. So avoid not making the best use of the effort that you're putting in, and monitor for the growth, you know, the earned growth rate impact and revenue impacts, because you can see how NPS, there's definite correlation. Reichheld published recently about, you know, using NPS type techniques to stop buying customers and instead grow people. So that's my position. You can do it if you do it right.
Thank you, Adam. So I hear that it's NPS, you need to do it right. And it's not about the score. Maybe it's a system, and it's a beginning of this investigating of customer experience and improving customer experience. So thank you very much, Adam. This is a common voice and opinion we hear on the debate on linking community a lot. Cool. Right. Let's dive into the next component. Blue team, we have another 7.5 minutes from Greg Dames. Greg, you want to share your screen or just
I
talk?
just did. Are you seeing it yet?
Let me see. Yes, I can see the screen. Here you go.
Okay. All right. So I love Adam's presentation because what he said leads perfectly into what I want to talk about, which is that NPS is nothing if it's not useful. So the question, the relevant question is NPS useful? So I want to talk about the relevance to the industry I work in, and I think most everybody here understands that retention is a pretty important factor. But we, in our business at ChurnRx, we do a lot of data. We've collected a huge, massive benchmark database of customer data. It's the biggest in the world, 1.8 million records and growing. And this is what we found. There's a very strong relationship between how long customers stay, which we use a metric called customer half-life. What's the average amount of time it takes customers, to lose half your customers, right? So it's a robust metric. And what we found is there's a very strong relationship. Obviously, churn's not the only factor. You've also got sales, right? So you could be not growing because you're not selling, which actually is really common right now. But the point is that if you hold sales constant, churn is the other major factor, retention's the other major factor. So it's sort of everything. You certainly can't raise money or sell your company for any value that is worth it if you can't show that you can keep customers. This is everything in our industry. Okay, so let's look at the research. What do we know about customer retention? Well, what I want to do is I want to show you what good looks like. So this on the screen is a curve that demonstrates the benchmark. This is all of the companies that are in our benchmark database put together. This is what churn looks like. It shows how many customers are left after each amount of months, basically, right? And half-life is how long does it take to lose half. In this case, the benchmark currently shows it takes about 14 months to lose half customers. If you look at all of SaaS, this is all SaaS, all B2B. Now, let me show you what really good looks like. This is phenomenal retention, right? This is the half-life goes up to 66 months. What we know is that customers with that kind of retention have extremely robust growth rates as long as they can keep selling. If you had this level of retention, you would be in the top 1% of our index. Okay, my customers, all my clients would kill to have this as their average churn. But guess what? This is a real cohort. And I want to show you who this cohort represents. This cohort are people who gave their vendor a 0 score on the NPS. 0. This is comprised of thousands of customers whose most recent rating, not ever, but the most recent one, is 0. These customers effectively say they hate you. You're the worst vendor they ever worked with, right? But the retention in this group is phenomenal. Again, anybody would kill for this kind of retention. So what in the heck is going on? What gives? Well, we've done this research. It was years ago that I first started to wonder this question: is NPS useful? How do I know? What can we do about it? So we started to test it. We've used lots of different metrics, but the beauty of NPS is everyone uses it. And what you would expect is something like this. The lifespan of a customer is somehow related, right, to their score. The higher score, the longer they stay. Here's what we actually find. This is a study that's bang up to date, 133,000 members in the study. Huge study out of millions of records. There's literally no statistical correlation at all at the record level, at the customer level. And this doesn't change. By the way, we've been doing this study for years. It's never changed. There's never been a correlation. We've tested lots of other customer SAT scores, et cetera. And I know NPS isn't a SAT score, but whatever it is, it has nothing to do with customer retention, which is really interesting. And let me put that in relief in a more extreme way. We test all sorts of things. We tested everything you can think of against customer retention. Lots of things correlate with customer retention. Almost anything you measure has some correlation. Might be weak, might be spurious. There's only one metric we've ever tested that literally never correlates with retention, and it's NPS and customer sat. Never. It's always 0. Which just raises the question, if it's not measuring the one thing that is the lifeblood of a subscription company, what could it possibly mean? How could we possibly interpret in a useful way? Now, there is a signal, by the way, in the data. These are the respondents. What if you look at the non-respondents? Turns out their lifespan is massively lower. So it's not the score we're measuring. Something else is, well, what is it? Obviously, it's engagement. A customer says they hate you, they're still engaged. It means you still matter to them. If it wasn't important to them, why would they even bother responding and say they hate you? So here's what the data looks like. If they respond at all, which on average our customers get about a 12% response rate, they're in a super high retention cohort. Essentially, churn is irrelevant in that group. It's so low that it has absolutely nothing to do with your business, your growth. It is not holding you back. This is dream retention. Okay. So this is why I say customers don't leave when they have a reason to leave. They leave when they no longer have a compelling reason to stay. Well, what does correlate? And the answer is results correlate. These are the curves for customers who didn't measure their results, who got poor results, good or expected results, and superior results. You can see that there's an extraordinarily strong correlation here. In fact, results predict customer retention at a very high rate. Customers with any results, if you just measure them, have a 6 times longer half-life than customers without. That's a massive difference. So what's the point of all this? Well, if NPS isn't measuring something related to why customers would themselves rejoin, forget about recommending to other people. I mean, it's hilarious, right? You can imagine the customer saying, it's not for us, it was useless, but I highly recommend it to other people. The truth is, actually, that's what people do. And Dave's point about surveys is not missed. Even if you ask customers if they're getting value, it doesn't correlate very strongly with retention. But if you look at whether they're measuring it, it does. So final point, we know customer sat is a real thing. We know it because we can reliably measure it, and we actually know how to improve it or make it worse. The problem is that it has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with customer retention, and therefore I don't see any way in which it could possibly be useful to subscription companies. That's all.
Awesome. Amazing. Give a hand applaud on Greg. There's a reason why Greg is a truth teller. He just throws the heavy data in the face. I don't even know what to think about this now after all this data. So apparently, as long as the customer responds, the retention is good. So it's kind of, even if they say, I hate you, it's a way of they saying like they care about you. So very intriguing information. Thank you very much, Greg, for the amazing insights and data. Well, that's thumbs up also. Let's see our last red team, Kobe Bok. See what you can do after all that.
Yeah, pretty happy to follow up those awesome slides. Thanks, Greg. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I spent the last 2 decades in customer-facing leadership roles, like I mentioned earlier, and I began my journey with NPS back in 2011. Got NPS certified through the company SAT metrics that was mentioned earlier. I attended probably 6 straight years of their NPS conferences, not only to learn, but to share progress on a program that I started. Soup to nuts, started from scratch, cobbling together no systems, and turned it into a well-orchestrated system that I used at a company that went from 500 million to $1 billion. So I have done the work from scrapping the program together to watching it be successful. And I would like to just say that, what if I told you there was a way to capture sentiment from your most loyal customers and get them to not only share it with a handful of their colleagues, but also bring trustworthy and qualified leads to the doorstep of your company. One of the things that I think that I've heard so far that's missing is nobody's talking about customer-led growth. We're talking about things like loyalty. We're talking about things like statistical measures and the way the questions formed and things like that. But who's taking this information and harnessing the promoters and the people that are talking about what's working in your company and driving it towards customer-led growth? So I want to start with a brief story. 2 weeks ago, one of my colleagues came up to me and he said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to tell you about the car experience I just had. I just bought a brand new car. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. It was a huge purchase. I was really nervous going into it, but it was so simple and easy. I was able to get everything I need, from financing to insurance to making sure I could get this car on the road in one day, that I just can't stop talking about it. I've already told 10 of my friends, and 3 of them are so impressed with the experience, they're going to go purchase the same type of car." That is what NPS is all about. When you do something so well as a company and there's proof of it, and you wrap a lasso around that and you harness that and push that forward into the people that within your company could make a difference for your customers, that's when you're going to start to see the progress. So we talked earlier on the red team about knowing about how to put a program together and stick with it. I think a lot of companies out there are underwater with their program, or they're not funded, or they don't have enough people to really put the foot down and get it done. And I've done that. I did it for 8 years. I watched the growth. I took promoters and I put it in front of the territory managers so they know who to talk to at the end of the quarter. I put heat maps together with recent survey results. I put so much information in the hands of the people within our company that we could take the customer's point of view and sentiment and use that to change what we were doing as a business. And I will tell you, it works. I'm convinced. I did it. And so again, I think so many people out there in their programs get hung up with, questions about lagging or leading indicators. This is intelligence. This is the intelligence you need from your customers. Every company out there is trying to gather intelligence from their customers. I don't care if it's 6% or 21%. You take what you can get. You take that information and you use it to your benefit for you, your growth, and for your customers. The other thing is, NPS brings something to the table that hasn't existed. And there's a reason it became the gold standard with so many different companies and industries. It's because you can benchmark against your competitors. You can benchmark against other like companies and understand that, we're good, but we're not so good. And what are we going to do about it? So for me, I was able to take this program and, first of all, turn it into a disciplined program that really showed it was working. I did everything. I correlated our growth to our customers, from promoters to detractors. I put the discipline down in this program and watched it work. I also came at it with creativity. And if you're not being creative, if you're locked in to the questions and how to do it, you're going to struggle. I'm here to tell you, if you put in the work, it's going to work for your business. You're going to see the benefits. So if you're out there listening right now and you're wondering what to do with your program, don't scrap it. Go all in. That's my suggestion.
Awesome. Thank you, Colby. I would say what I hear is like, 6%, 10%, 15%, doesn't matter what percentage it is. Customer intel these days so difficult to get. If you can get any, do it. And Kobe's point is like, go all in, do it properly, do it in the right methods, and you get results. Thank you very much for this amazing insight. I've definitely learned a lot today. A lot unexpected things throughout this. We're going to the next phase of next 15 minutes. We're going to do some live debates. Okay, so first off, we're going to have Amy come up with some burning, spicy customer questions that you guys asked in the comments. And then we're going to have blue team question red team, and then red team question blue. So, customer first, audience first, then blue, then red. We're going to do this a few rounds until the time runs out. Okay. Amy, are you ready to provide us with some spicy questions?
I'm following the questions that have gotten the most thumbs up in the chat and the comments. One from Chris, is it possible NPS is a vanity metric when it's predicting churn, but not a vanity metric when it's predicting overall business vitality? I think that's an interesting angle. And we've seen data on both sides about churn prediction versus growth prediction. So curious if anybody wants to jump in on that.
I'll jump quickly on the growth thing. It doesn't predict growth. What it does predict is relative market share. There's a very big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if you're interested in his relative market share, my advice would be measure market share.
All right, who else want to chime in? If not, we can consider this a wrap on this question.
I'll jump in one quick point.
Sure.
I said that we know customer sat is a real thing. There's nothing in my data that denies that's a real factor in the customer everything. The question is, what does it mean, right? So I believe that it's challenging for companies to improve their NPS because it's a real thing and you have to do real things to your business to get there. Is it impossible to believe that there's a correlation because companies that do that well also do many other things well, the kinds of things my metrics do measure? So I believe there's an indirect relationship just based on how competent companies are. It doesn't surprise me companies with high overall NPS also do things that drive higher retention and growth.
Great. Awesome. We will give the blue team a chance to question red team's evidence and points. And then next one would be red team question blue team. Blue team, you ready? We're ready for you.
I got a question I've got to ask Bill. Gloves off, Bill.
Let's do it.
In your presentation, you talked about the difference between willingness to recommend and actual recommendation. You said, I want to put a pin in that. Is it that you want to put a pin in that because actually there is not much of a relationship? And by the way, I think I know the answer to the question.
Well, the analogy is anyone who's ever been to a Silicon Valley Tech meetup knows that people say they want the vegetable tray, but when they get there, all the pizza's gone, the vegetable sits there rotting, right? So just because I say I'm going to recommend doesn't mean I will, right? However,
correct.
However, if you are asking the question, will you recommend? And someone says, yes, I will. It stands to reason someone would want to track, well, did they? Okay, yes or no. And then 2, did the person who was the recommendee, did they actually buy something, right? Did they or not? I mean, everyone has a CRM with a category in the dropdown that says referral. And yet I argue no one actually even cares. They don't really track that number. I think they're faking it. Is what I'm saying.
And the reason I say I know the answer is there's a well-known bank. It was one of the first non-branch banks in the UK called First Direct. And one of the first questions they ask a new customer is, how did you learn about us? And they track recommend, and they actually say, if you've been recommended, who recommended us?
Yeah.
So again, do I think willingness to recommend is interesting? Yes, I do. But why not track the real thing, not the proxy?
The actual recommendation, right?
Yeah.
Right.
One question for me, one more, or do you want to go back and forth, Li-Hong?
Let's give red team a chance. Come on.
Okay, just one more.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Can I add to that last question? I believe that the companies have a tendency to get hung up in the semantics, right? The willingness to recommend. What does that mean? What does that tell you? If you approach those customers, let's say in a B2B space, and you say, hey, you said that you're willing to recommend, let's talk about that. And you talk about it and you're like, would you be willing to participate in a reference program with us? Absolutely. I think you guys are great. That's why I filled out the survey. I'd love to participate in a reference program. And you leverage that information and you turn that into customer-led growth. So it's not always that you're stuck saying, well, I hope they recommend us to 3 of their friends. You have to activate those promoters. You have to activate those conversations to get them move, especially in the business, the B2B space. And it works. It will work.
Well, that perfectly tees up my question, which is, what data do you have to prove that it works? We've tested many things. One thing we tested, for instance, is this very interesting hypothesis that if a customer starts with a low score and we're able to move it up, that increases their chances of retention. Turns out that's not true. There's zero connection, zero correlation there. So I am very intrigued and interested in how do you act on NPS in a way that you can demonstrate with data actually produces the improvement.
Thanks, Greg. So one comment on what you're just saying, in the certification program that I went through back in the day, they recommended that you don't work hard to take a 0 or a passive even to a promoter, that you harness your promoters first. You work your 9s and 10s. They're already telling you they want to recommend. And then you look at your 8s and you turn your 8s to 9s. You don't take your 0s to 10s. And I think companies get hung up doing that. You keep your detractors at a low simmer. The whole purpose of this program is to drive business growth. And if you know what you're doing, based on the feedback that you're getting, and you're getting it frequently, you can infuse that into what's happening with your company. So the data that I have is that I watched it work. I enabled the sales teams, the reference programs with the data frequently for 8 years straight, and watched the growth happen with my own eyes. So I can't tell you the number of thank yous that I got from territory managers and inside sales reps saying, hey, thanks for putting that survey at my fingertips so that I knew at the end of the quarter not to call that detractor. Or thank you so much for putting that heat map together in my region so I could invite detractors in with my promoters and have them help us solve their own problems. That's how you activate that data.
And I think, Greg, I was going to say, you showed us some of that evidence where the people who were not responding, maybe they weren't getting, they were the poorest performers. So I guess my question would be, if you had a simple, because you don't need to make NPS, the system, overly precious. If you had a simple way to ensure some rigor within your organization, that you were making that kind of contact that might get people out of that, no respondent hole, wouldn't that be worthwhile?
Oh, that would be. Yes, that would work, but that has nothing to do with improving the score. What our data shows is that if you ask people what their favorite color is, you get more or less the exact same signal. NPS has no special ability to discern a difference. It's literally, are they engaged or are they not? So yes, if you drive engagement, that's powerful. That's actually what I think is the key win here.
Cool.
I want to
add Manel, I want to add a funny audience comment here. People come to your service or product to buy product, not to recommend this. So it's pretty interesting. In the audience, I see a lot of people asking, how do you take action on the NPS data? Let's say your NPS score dropped 6 point or above 6 point, and you haven't done anything in the last quarter, but this happens. How do you take action on that result?
Both Adam and Colby said something which is very important and very, very right. And that is, it's not about the score, it's about the system. It's about what some people call closed loop. So it's gathering feedback. And by the way, it doesn't have to be surveys. It's whatever mechanisms you use, and you should have multiple mechanisms to listen to customers, to combine that with other data, to understand it, and then act upon that. That matters. By the way, the same people that that run the American Customer Satisfaction Index, that proponents of customer satisfaction, that are proponents of customer effort score would say exactly the same thing. The system that you use matters. What question you ask, what the score is, doesn't matter. Even, by the way, the ability to benchmark it. The only benchmark that matters is the one relative to your previous scores. Because comparing to other people is by definition a vanity metric.
The only thing I would add to that is that in our benchmark we also index overall increasing in NPS, and it has been increasing in our benchmark for years. Guess what? Churn has been decreasing in our index more than proportionately for over the same period. So we've had about a 12% increase in NPS over the last 5 years. We've seen about a 20-something%, 22 or 23% decrease in retention. Yeah. They're moving in opposite directions.
And I'll just add on the actionable part. Neil, go ahead.
No. So what I wanted to kind of get at is I think I'm hearing two different arguments, right? I mean, the red team is saying the NPS score is useful. Yes, I hear that it is useful for certain cases of getting real customer feedback. And we are also hearing that the NPS score is useless in terms of managing your retention, in terms of managing renewals. So there are two different satisfaction metrics. NPS cannot be used as a measure for retention and renewals. That's what I'm hearing. So I want to kind of give some of the numbers that you guys shared, right? So we have our customer base, and if 94%, according to Dave, are not included in that NPS score survey, and only 12% respond to the survey that you have sent, and 12% of 6%, which is 0.5% of your customer base, are coming back and saying, I hate you or I love you. Let us say, even if they come back with I hate you, that means they're at least showing some affection to you to respond. So if I say 100% of that base is retention, I can guarantee 0.5% of my customers will stay, right? So that's what I'm seeing as far as numbers are concerned. So, all the ones I've heard from the red team is more tactical. Yes, my customers love us. Yes, they have a problem. Let me jump in, address that problem. Doesn't tell me will they double my renewal or my ARR within 18 months, within 24 months. There is no guarantee. At the end of the day, we are in the business of making money while we keep our customers happy. Does NPS fit into that spectrum? I believe not. Right? That's how I see it. There are a whole bunch of other things that it's useful for, not for retention. I'm sorry.
One question from the audience, Stefan. He asked, Greg, would you say that your data is applicable to all type of business? For example, professional engineering services. Have you seen other similar studies? And then the next question for the rest team. Sorry, it kind of jumped. Is there any study that do draw a correlation between high NPS values and improved financial performance? So I let Greg answer that first, and then red team can answer the second one.
I'll be quick because I want to make sure everyone has time. The answer is our benchmark database is 90-something% B2B SaaS. However, 10 years ago, there was a study done by CEB. Those are the people that did the Challenger sale. It was reported in a book called The Effortless Experience. Great book, recommend it. The data they had, over 100,000 data points, was from consumer-based companies, nothing B2B in there, no SaaS, in fact. And the result was exactly the same. And they weren't measuring NPS, they were measuring a customer sat index. It matches everything we've ever done. Doesn't matter what survey we measure, doesn't matter where we see it. We have done a couple outside of SaaS B2B, same result. But to be fair, our data is dominantly SaaS B2B.
Great. On red team, do you see any correlation between high NPS and improved financial performance?
Yes, but that's the relative data, right? Dave Jackson made that point earlier. So high NPS companies outperform their peers. That doesn't mean, if they're all losing money, we lose less, right? But you're outperforming your peers. So there is.
Yeah. But what it doesn't do, Bill, is doesn't predict that if you increase your NPS, your revenue and your profits will increase. There is no study that's ever shown that relationship.
Correct.
And it also doesn't demonstrate that NPS is the reason those firms did better. There could be many other reasons, and I would argue that there are.
Yeah. There was a great study done many years ago by the UK telecoms provider at the time, British Telecom, which showed that the people that use phones most were cat owners. It's a correlation. It was by far the strongest correlation. It was a strong correlation. It's got nothing to do with causality.
Of course, in fairness, the
They didn't think
entire.
They didn't think about sending a cat to every subscriber.
Like, wasn't talking to you, Adam.
But hold on, the entire big data movement is all about correlation anyway, which is why Walmart knows if there's a hurricane, Cheetos sales go up 17 days later on a Thursday, right? So it doesn't matter really.
What matters, Bill, and a lot of people make this mistake, they confuse correlation and causality.
Indeed.
Just because two things are related doesn't mean that one causes the second. It could do.
It still can be useful as all. It still can be useful. That's all.
Yeah. Cat ownership.
Yeah.
All right. This is fun debate. We've hit the hour mark, which means it's time to call it a day. Before we go, let's give a round of virtual applause to the amazing guests and our engaged audience. That's awesome. I've learned a lot. It's getting heated debate, and even the chat channel. If people are debating on the chat against each other, pretty fun. I want to let you know the judges here are the audience who will be listen to this call or listen to the recording. The LinkedIn poll to vote for the winning team is already up, and the winning team will get forever bargain right the rest of year until the next time we see around. But anyway, thank you so much for the support. Cast your vote to support your team. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. See you.
And thank you for organizing, Li Hong.
Yes,
Thank you, Leon. Appreciate it.